Excited that you are back on Fast and Easy Tips for Peak Performance. Today we have certified life coach Greg Audino. What's up?
Hello, everybody. Nice to see you. Well, nice to talk to you.
He is an amazing life coach that's really transformed many different people from all over the world, and he's got this hilarious Instagram called Simply Greggles, and it just, I don't know, it brightened my day. So I was like, I need to find this guy and I need him to share. And what's really cool about him and his website and his platform is that he does donations to the World Wildlife Fund too. So he's got this component into his world. And so I just wanted to share a little bit about you. But today, what we're talking about is temptation, which is huge because no matter if you're in the health world, if you're in the professional world, all these components really matter. And so we want to dive deep and see how your value systems are affecting your brain, your body, your connections to spirit and everything like that too. So tell me a little bit about your story, Greg, and how you got started.
Shucks. Well, let's see. I suppose it's sort of been budding since I was a child. So way back in high school, I wanted to be a marriage counselor, and I was really into helping people with their relationships, mostly because I couldn't get my own. But also I was just always very thoughtful about things, thoughtful about existence, thoughtful about relationships. So I wanted to do that in high school. But then I ended up becoming an actor, which I was doing full time for about 6 years. So I graduated college and then I started that right away. But over time, throughout the course of my, between 22 and 28, where I am now, my priorities started to change a lot. And I started to think about things differently. Acting was of great value to me, but realistically, I felt as though I wasn't contributing enough to other people. Because I'm very blessed in many ways. And I sort of feel that much more, because of that, I feel that much more, inclined to sort of send the elevator back down, if you will. And then there was a period, so that, I started thinking about my daily routine and how much am I helping others versus just sort of taking from the universe, or however you'd like to phrase it. So there was that. And then I went through a very difficult breakup with my girlfriend. And I remember really just wishing that somebody would listen to me when I needed to speak and express myself. And there were people to listen, that were, but it never felt quite enough to me. So I started to understand the value in having somebody to listen to, or being there to support somebody and listen to them rather. And then finally, the 2016 election happened, and regardless of who you support, every election sort of surfaces these real world problems. All of these very powerful issues are being addressed, and meanwhile, there's everybody on Facebook just typing away about how this should be different and that should be different, but they don't really do anything. And then I agreed. I was like, I also think things should change and that these people should be helped, but here I am not doing anything at all. So all of these things just started to equate to me looking for a way to be of service to others. And because I was used to listening and questioning things at a deep level, I was like, well, how does that, if that's something I can provide, how can I translate that into a service? And then the final straw would have been, I want to say March 6th, 2017. It was a Sunday morning. I was hungover the day after my 26th birthday, just watching Netflix, as we've probably all done on a Sunday morning hungover. And the Tony Robbins documentary came on, I Am Not Your Guru. And I think that sort of put me over the edge. A lot of people have mixed opinions about Tony these days. But this man has touched so many lives, and it was very impactful for me to watch. And I think, so that was sort of the icing on the cake. It was just very inspiring to see a life that is just so devoted to helping others. So all of these things sort of equated to me getting my life coaching certification, and then the rest is history.
Yeah, you are a driven millennial, and I think that the way that you reflect on it started really, really far back. And so I challenge a lot of the listeners to really look at your life and look at what jived for you. When you're passionate about something, and if you're not checked into that, it might feel a little wonky at first, but taking that and saying, I'm going to go for it is huge. And it just continued to evolve for you, right? The universe brought you those opportunities again and again. And then today, what's really great is you really do talk about how no matter where we stem from, whether that's where we grew up or the value systems that our parents put onto us. Like there's an importance of having this well-rounded emotional understanding about yourself, your values. And then today we're going to talk a little bit about temptation and how that actually is like a really cool microscope to see how your values are churning within you and how they can change. Because we know that performing well is a value. I think that's why, you guys are in here, and on my audience, you guys really trust that the things I'm going to share with you are going to give you that level up. And a lot of it is just slowing down sometimes. And so Greg, tell me a little bit about, how you see temptation in your daily life. And then we can kind of dive into some tools for the audience.
Yeah. So how temptation affects me, or my feelings about temptation?
Both.
Okay. Temptation is, I think, one of the most misunderstood things in the world, just because, I really like to challenge like very common ways of thinking about things. And temptation is something that everybody seems to have their minds made up about. It's like, oh, resist temptation. That's a phrase that everyone is very familiar with. And to me, I just think that this is so incredibly preposterous. Not to say that temptation should always be resisted, but to just sort of shoo it away immediately and not give it a second thought, I think is ridiculous, just because, temptation is trying to teach us a lesson. It's our body, mind, soul's way of telling us that we are depleted in something. You know what I mean? So it's not to say that you should act on every urge. That would be highly problematic, but to not, it's this idea of like digging into pain and like leaning into pain and, not running away from negative feelings. And temptation is one of them. So if you're tempted by something that is not aligned with who you necessarily want to be, to just ignore that is to ignore a big part of yourself and to ignore a potential lesson, not only about the situation at hand and the, that which you're tempted about, but yourself as well. So, yeah, I just think that there's a lot to learn from temptation that goes overlooked. And many of the things we learn that we would learn from temptation are just other aspects of who we want to be that we might not realize or might not want to say that we want to be. Does that make sense?
Sure. It does, yeah. And that's that microscope, right? Saying, okay, not only am I having this emotional response to something, and it doesn't necessarily even have to be negative. We're going to talk about a couple of examples of when temptation can flow into your life, and you guys can plug and play the scenario. But it's going to bring up a lot of that for you, and it's going to show you, how can I shift, or how am I doing something really well, and just celebrating that, like, you have some parts of your life on lock and you understand and you're in that value system. I mean, you feel really good about that, and that's what's getting you results. So on both hands, we're going to show you how temptation can really support you. What are a couple examples of temptation?
Yeah. All right. So say, like for me personally, this happened last night and it's all coming together. I was very tempted to reach out to my friends and say, let's have a game night tonight, which is going to happen and it will be wonderful. So the feeling of temptation because again, temptation is not always negative. The feeling of temptation to reach out to my friends and request a game night reflects my value in friendship, right? There's nothing wrong with this. This is a value that a lot of people like. It's a value that I like. I like the fact that my relationships are a huge value system of mine. And planning a game night is one habit, step, action that I take that supports that value, that lets me live through that value, and thus provides me with joy and happiness, right? It's quite simple. However, temptation in a negative light, which is the way that most people would even, just label temptation, if you will. Say I'm very tempted to eat a piece of cake. This is something that a lot of people struggle with. This is a temptation surrounding diet culture. So if you're tempted to eat a piece of cake and one of your values is health, for example, and you want to be, health is a part of your identity and it's something that you want in your life, then, I want to eat a piece of cake. I need to resist that temptation because that's not in line with the identity that I want to have or that I want to project. So at this time, a lot of people would say, all right, well, I'm not going to eat the cake. I'll just put that away and hope that feeling doesn't come back, blah, blah, blah. But if one is able to dig into that pain and lean into that discomfort and uncomfortable feeling, we can learn about ourselves, right? So first we can say like, why do I want to have this piece of cake? Well, maybe it's because I'm hungry, right? Maybe it's, maybe I just haven't had sweets. Maybe my blood sugar is low, whatever. But realistically, the thing is, if you want to have cake to any degree, that means you have some sort of value in that cake, right? So your cake, the cake, or sweets or whatever, is a part of your value system, even if you don't want it to be. So the other example, relationships, like, oh, that's a great value, I want to tend to that. But this seems to counteract, this value that you have for health. So what it really does is temptation teaches us what values are being depleted, right? So my health value is not really, I want to maintain that, but it's obviously, it's struggling right now if I'm tempted by this cake. And it turns out that like maybe that is a value that you have that you don't necessarily want to have. And then it's like, well, where does that start from, right? Maybe there was maybe my health value actually comes from a physique value because I was bullied about my physique as a child, and that's why I value health. But realistically, I'm suppressing all these emotions towards it, like emotions that come from cake. So at that point, it's very unique to everybody. Certain questions about like, limitation and how much you want to allow and balance come in. But realistically, it gives you, by leaning into this temptation for cake, you are able to learn about what other values you have that you might not want to have, that don't necessarily align with who you are, but are a part of who you are. And a lot of these things that we value started at a very young age, again, because of like past experiences, past traumas, or whatever. And those are parts of you that need to be addressed. They may not be the parts you choose, but they do need to be addressed because they're values nonetheless. And, that can start with just being accepting of yourself, and which becomes easier once you start to reflect on where this might have come from and just sort of show yourself some sympathy. But, if you really, like, if you needed to, you could see a therapist about that to understand these past traumas and why you have these feelings that you might not want. But realistically, the idea is that with temptation, there are great learning experiences to be had.
Yes, I completely agree. And as a holistic health coach, that's a huge component of what I do. We say, okay, what is your relationships to food? How's the nutrient density and what is it actually doing for your physical body? But then if we are going to take things away, I want to be super conscientious about what struggle that's going to bring up for you, or where it is that it's coming from. Like for me, I think of angel food cake with chocolate frosting, and that is like my mom's birthday cake. like that is, you know what I mean? Like, and it goes from when I was like, even like they were putting spoonfuls of it like way back when I wasn't even like eating it to myself. And so that relationship to that experience stems my whole reality of like being able to say, I know where that value comes from.
Yeah.
And I respect it. Like I want this temptation talk to not confuse our audience and say that we want you to not do something. Like, I want you to know though, that like, you're going to be so much clearer and you're going to perform so much better when you think angel food cake. I remember being young. I remember the love from my parents. I remember really sucking at frosting it because I was a little, but my mom told me to keep doing it. And I learned so much from her in that, and unpeeling those layers. And I think that's huge because you end up seeing what it is your true value is. And you say the word value, and that's going to be different for everybody. But within that one value category, right? Let's say it is health. I like what you said, because you take the health category and you say, I value this. And I'm not going to dismiss something right away. Instead, I'm going to go, maybe it is a body image physique thing.
Yeah.
Maybe it is a sugar addiction thing. Maybe it is, I'm in a social situation and everyone else is doing it, right? So there's those components of your health that just being conscientious and aware of is going to transform. And that took me like 8 years to really solve and figure out what it was to love those components, good and bad. And now when I come into temptation, and you can, kind of piggyback off me with this, is like, I think about that. Like, it's a default mindset for me to go like, oh, weird, I'm being tempted now. Like, and checking in on all those different parts of me.
Mm-hmm.
Do you feel like you do that?
I do. Yeah. I mean, I've gotten better at it. It definitely takes
exactly.
a degree of self-awareness to start questioning in that way. And that's, why we talk about these things, because again, the person who's not really used to thinking in that way, the person who's not self-aware in that way is quick to just resist the temptation, say cake is bad, I'm not having cake. You know what I mean? But again, if they're able to dig into the memories surrounding it, whether they be good or bad, they might learn a lot of that. They might learn that they have a strong problem with body image, and being able to resolve that could grant them so much freedom. But they would never give themselves the opportunity to resolve that had they not leaned into that pain and that temptation in the first place. So yeah, I mean, in doing so, whether it's good temptation or bad, it's all reflective of something that you need, and therefore all reflective of something that you value. So once you're able to hone in on what your values are based on temptation, you are then able to understand like what your compass is, because like if you're not living by your values, you're going to be out of alignment in so many ways, and you're not going to have that joy in your life. You can be living by your values and not really know what they are necessarily. Like, there are plenty of happy people in the world who have not like taken out their fucking notepad and said like, my values are X, Y, and Z. But for those who are struggling, the clearer they can become about their values, the better, because then they can create steps, they can create habits that allow them to live through their values on a daily basis. You know what I mean? So at that point, it's just a matter of brainstorming and thinking outside the box and considering how they can make time for things that support their values and eliminate things that don't support their values. And all of a sudden their lives change in a huge way.
There's this, I love how you said freedom, because that's what it feels like. And it's not this, let freedom ring. Like, it's this intrinsic like freedom, this confidence in yourself, to really say, I got this on lock, and all these situations, if they're triggering me in the pro or if they're triggering me in the con, like, I trust myself to handle them, and that it's going to be a practice. Like you said, it's not going to be perfect every time. But just bringing that awareness into it is powerful. And so that's what we wanted to share with you today. And that's your tip. Is, if you give a couple fucks, I want you to write your XYZs. If you feel like you've got this unlocked, then I really want you to celebrate, and I want you to like feel yummy in those memories, because your why. Whether it is about food, whether it is about new habits, whether it is about the relationships in your office or whoever you kind of come across, and just really framing that uncomfortableness that temptation can bring you and not sweeping it under the rug, because you're going to grow so much more in that sense. So, Greg, it was such a pleasure to kind of dive deep on that and kind of just learn how to see temptation in like a really unique light. And I think that we needed to talk about that early on, so that people, as they hear more, you're able to kind of explore those parts of your life. So where can we find you online so that people can learn more, and maybe even donate to the World Wildlife Fund?
Yeah, sure. So I have my website, gregaudino.com. That's GREGAUDINO.com. So I have all my videos and articles there. I also have a Patreon. If you go to Patreon and search Greg Audino, you can donate as well. And yeah, through those sites, you can also book free life coaching sessions with me. I offer one free session to anybody who's curious. So yeah, those are my hubs. You can also find me on Medium. I'm writing on Medium. Instagram, like you mentioned, Simply Greggles. That's a lot of fun. But yeah, so yeah, I'm all over the place. It's kind of my duty,
Yeah, for sure. That's awesome. And we're going to get you that, we're going to get the audience that link, for you guys to be able to just quickly get into his things and learn more about him. So Greg, thank you so much for being on The Driven Millennial and talking a little bit about temptation, and we'll see you later.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. Take care.